What's going on, ladies and gents? Nice to chop it up with you as always. Uh, more draft information on the horizon. I thought this was pretty cool. Jets X Factor provided a lot of this information, by the way, so I'll put some of the links to the articles and stuff that I've seen regarding it. But we knew there was going to be trends at some point that Joe Douglas might favor in terms of the draft. And I found a really interesting nugget when it came to some of those premium positions right at the top. So let's go ahead and get into it. This is essentially going to be Joe Douglas's third draft now. Two drafts with a decent sized pool of players is a pretty good enough selection for us to kind of derive maybe some trends from it, right? For anybody that doesn't know, in the world of analysis, there's lots of metrics for any and everything that you can put out there, and it always can either shine a positive light, a negative light on a player, depending on how it's being framed and the information that's being presented for it. Without the proper context, things can get skewed a bit. So when it comes to Joe Douglas and most NFL teams around the league, everybody's essentially going to follow this RAS score or the relative athletic score for players in terms of like one of those dynamic metrics that you're going to find for a player. Now, in the past two drafts for Joe Douglas, there's been a trend for him where he hasn't in the first, and I want to say it's the first 3 rounds. Yeah, because it's first 2 days. So in the first 3 rounds of the draft, he hasn't selected anybody with lower than a 9.0 for the relative athletic score. So just to give you guys a little bit of some background for it, right? So the relative athletic score is going to be a metric that can easily and intuitively gauge a player's athletic abilities relative to the position they play. So it's rated 0 out of 10. If you're at 10, you're at the upper echelon, most elite scale at your position for your size, speed, weight, etc., and your position. And if you're at a 0, you're kind of athletically performing the worst at that position. Again, for things like your size, your speed, your weight, etc. Not everybody ends up qualifying, of course, because not everybody is running through, the combine events. There might not even be pro day data for example. Even up until this point, we have no knowledge of what like Drake London's RAS would look like. Now, with that said, the most interesting nugget, again, is going to be in the first 3 rounds. He hasn't selected anybody that's under 9.0. And to frame it another way, basically, this means if somebody scores a 9, they perform better than 90% of the players at their position based on, their physical attributes, which I think is really interesting. So it's a very dynamic stat just for a general baseline of things. Now, when we take a look at the draft, a lot of the mock predictions that have been put out there and stuff, this really eliminates quite a few people if we believe that this trend is a fact and not just something that happens to be, a happenstance or a circumstance. So when we're talking kind of, round one talents, and this is just in general, I'm not even talking just, the top 10 picks, but a lot of these players are going to fall somewhere in that general range. We're talking about at cornerback, only Trent McDuffie. A lot of it, again, is going to be due to, not having full stats for everybody to actually build out a full relative athletic score. But Trent McDuffie is scoring pretty highly up there at a 9.49 at the position we all care about, which is going to be that edge spot, or at least players that's going to be on the defensive line. Although you have to imagine it's going to be an edge. We're talking Trayvon Walker, who has the highest score at a 9.99. Aiden Hutchinson, 9.88. Kayvon Thibodeau, who has a 9.63. And then we have Jermaine Johnson at a 9.23, and then George Karlaftis at a 9.21. So I think it's very, very interesting. I've seen Trayvon Walker skyrocket. He's even mocked as going as high as the number 1 pick at in certain mock drafts. Keep in mind, though, this is one of those things, again, you want to kind of have a full picture idea. Don't just rely on the RAS for this, right? So even though Trayvon Walker is almost perfect in terms of an athlete for his position based on his attributes, what's the context of everything else, right? He has poorer stats pretty much across the board for everything. So I kind of picture him in the mold of what Quentin Williams was expected to be coming out, right? freak athlete for his position. Can he put everything together, right? Same thing along the lines of one of the other big names would be Jermaine Johnson. He did have stats, right? I think it was 11 and a half sacks. I want to say it was either 9.5 or like 16.5 tackles for loss, something crazy like that. It looks good on paper, but when you break down the film, he doesn't necessarily have any pass rushing tools in terms of specifically like a bull rush he can go to. There's a lot of wasted steps in his progression towards the quarterback and just overall lacking a plan. So this, makes me favor players like Aiden Hutchinson, Kayvon Thibodeau, George Karlaftis even more for those players that do have, an ace in their sleeve or some extra tricks up their bag on the way of getting to the quarterback. So some of the other, high profile type players, Jordan Davis, Devontae Wyatt. At O-line, we have Zion Johnson. Kyle Hamilton still fits the mold here at a 9.33, which is crazy because a lot of people are harping on that. Was it a 4.59 originally? And then I think he even went as high as 4.7. Whatever the discrepancy there is, either way, much slower in comparison to that one highlight play he has of getting completely across the field to grab an interception. So there's also things that for whatever reason, maybe people just don't generally test well, right? And they're much quicker on field than, in a testing setting. So there's going to be a lot of interesting things that's at play there. The fact that the previous histories of Saleh and Joe Douglas's teams, as I've mentioned multiple times, they don't necessarily pick a lot of positions like cornerback, safety, etc. at a high scale or at a premium spot in the drafts, like round 1, round 2 necessarily, especially not in the top 10. But I think for the most interesting position, which is what generally everybody cares the most about, is at wide receiver. There's no wide receiver that tests highly that's in the first round right now. Keep in mind also, again, combines, people not being able to necessarily go out there and perform and, go through all the testings, accounts for things. So somebody like a Jamison Williams and probably even John Mechie could be on there, potentially even Drake London, but we just don't have it yet. But there's 3 names in particular that are really interesting. Christian Watson scoring the highest. Alec Pierce, the boy from Cincinnati, who's a beast, and he's sneakily becoming a favorite of mine. And then George Pickens, kind of rounding out the top 3 there. So I'm super excited to see what happens. Keep in mind, again, I'm going to be dropping a mock draft as well pretty soon here, towards the end of this week, if not sooner. So I'm looking forward to a lot of this, last minute information I'm putting together for you guys. But let me know what your thoughts are. Kind of knowing this information now, I know everybody's not going to go out and search, an RAS score for everybody, but from what you know about the athletic profiles about certain players, do you guys think there are players that we'll have a preference for now, considering we want high-end? Basically what it means is that we want high-end athletes in the first 3 rounds, and then after that is when you see him generally take shots for people that maybe didn't necessarily test well, but the game film still looks great, or whatever about it that's attracting the Jets. So appreciate you guys for watching, all the support, and I'll catch you again. Peace.